Welcome, everybody, to Highside, Lowside. My name is Zach. I'm joined by my buddy Spurg. As always, this is Season 10, Episode 11. That's right. Episode 11 is always a special one, everybody. It is listener comments and questions. A full pod dedicated to what you want to know or you want us to know. Also, one of the most unique bikes ever found on Facebook Marketplace, and a helicopter pilot gets a free t-shirt. All that and more coming right up after a word from our sponsor.
Gas prices are a bitch, and that's why you ride a motorcycle, to save money on fuel. But you've noticed that your fuel consumption, your beloved bike, has gotten a little bit lackluster lately. Well, maybe that's because your fueling system is a little dirty. Luckily for you, Motul has you covered with their Motul valve and injector cleaner additive. One bottle will treat up to 60 liters of fuel. You put it in there once every 6 months and it does its thing. So keep your bike in its most efficient form possible to keep money in your wallet. Check out Motul's full line of products, including the Motul valve and injector cleaner, over on RevZilla.com/Motul. That's RevZilla.com/MOTUL. And while you're over there on RevZilla.com, make sure you check out the RPM program. That's the Rider's Preferred Membership Program, now only $39.99 a year. You get all kinds of discounts on motorcycle gear and apparel. You get $15 for just signing up, free 2-day shipping, concierge service, and it works across all of RevZilla's sister brands. That means J&P Cycles, Cycle Gear, RevZilla, and Rever. To learn more about all the benefits of the RPM program, head over to RevZilla.com/RPM. That's RevZilla.com/RPM. Now, on with the show.
Here we go, everybody. Highside, Lowsiders, welcome. We are on to what we like to call the penultimate episode of Season 10. This is Episode 11. This is a common episode, Spurge. This is a fun one. This is where we get to answer all the questions and talk to the people.
If I remember back to one of the comments we got last year about our last season about our penultimate episode, it was that we didn't use the word penultimate in the episode because if you remember back a few seasons, Zachary taught me that the word penultimate means second to last. And then we had been calling it out. And then last season, we forgot to call it the penultimate episode. And somebody wrote in and said, Spurgeon's vocabulary lesson is going to fall off a cliff.
I didn't even know that was the thing that happened. But I'm happy to have satisfied 30%
It's appropriate
of our
for
audience.
a comment episode to talk about a comment that was left last season.
Spurge, I'd like to call something else out. You notice anything in here with my
for those of you that are
upper lip?
not watching the video, Zach is stroking what is sure to be a majestic mustache. I want to say that Zach he's discovered that a mustache is growing on his face. His beard is still there. So he's eventually going to have to trim away the beard to reveal the full majesty of that stash.
I already have, actually. The beard's already shorter than the stash, but I haven't gone full stash yet.
Could you do that for the finale? You think we could maybe for the finale episode we go full stash?
Okay, maybe. That'll be the ultimate tease for CTXP, because it's the CTXP mustache I'm growing out here.
I know. Is this for an episode that you can tell us about?
Oh, I wish I could tell you all about it. But all I can tell you is that it takes place in 1938. And we're going back in time for this episode, and I need a 1930s mustache. So this is my best. I'm going French fighter pilot.
You look great. Hopefully the episode will be out around middle of November for those of you marking your calendars.
This is a long play and a long mustache.
What I will say is that this is not the only time Zach has talked about his mustache. In every meeting that I've been in with him in the last 2 weeks, he brings up the fact that he's able to grow a mustache, and he spends most of his time sitting there stroking it and not paying attention to the meeting that he's in.
That's obviously a lie. I don't talk about it. I do touch it a lot, but that's mostly because it's itchy, not because I'm particularly proud of it.
We're still talking about the mustache, right?
That's a great segue into our warm-up here, which is an online find that was sent to us from a lovely listener, Andrew, via email, who said, "Gentlemen, when I saw this, I had to share it. Is it technically a Rebel 500? Now, if you're watching on YouTube or Spotify, you will see the photo that we were looking at. But if you're not, then I shall describe it. What we have here is a custom painted tangerine with a black stripe Rebel 250 from, circa 1986. But it's not just any Rebel 250. This is a Rebel 250 and a half, you might say. It's the front of one Rebel 250 plugged into the front of another Rebel 250, making a sort of tandem Rebel 250, twin engine Rebel 250 that actually looks like it's built pretty well, Spurge.
Well, my question is, it does look like it's built pretty well. Do you remember the name of the episode that you did with Ari on Motor Trend where you built the BMW?
I think we called it the Sport Utility Cycle, the SUC, because it's the SUV of motorcycling. It was a 5-person motorcycle. It was an 11-foot long BMW R1150R that we built to carry 5 people.
So I found the article. So we can put the link for the article up there, and we can put the photos. Okay. Yeah. So because you were writing for Common Tread at this point, Ari Henning wrote the article. The article was titled "Building the Sport Utility Cycle: A Motorcycle Built for 5." And I would say, if I'm looking at, could you buy a tandem Rebel 500? Apparently you can. Somebody built one, but you could also just build one yourself if you follow the simple instructions of how Zack and Ari built a 5-person BMW. And Zack, in your experience, how does a tandem motorcycle or a quad motorcycle, pentacycle? how does that handle? How does it, is it fun to ride?
Okay. So I'm just looking at the pictures. I forgot that we published this article. I'll say this. It took some getting used to, but it was a surprisingly adept machine. Our sport utility cycle, that is. It did high center a couple times when we took it off road because it's a sport utility cycle. Of course, you can't. This isn't just for pavement. You got to be able to take it off road. And we did get it stuck once or twice because of the 11-foot wheelbase or 10.5-foot wheelbase or something like that. I did high center a couple times, but amazingly adept. I mean, like truly. We were talking about taking it to a track day at the end of it. We rode up a mountain road and we were like, this thing handles great. The tricky bit was when the person up front pulled in the clutch lever, the person in the back had to know to shift gears. So it helps if you have a long-standing relationship with the person with which you're riding the sport utility cycle, as luckily my buddy Ari and I did. So we do have a bit of experience with
crashing it off-road, getting it. There's some good photos in this article.
There are some great photos. I forgot about the photos. It's really fun. Anyway, I believe at the time of recording this tandem Rebel 250, Rebel 250 and a half has sold. But maybe it'll come back up. Honestly, it looks much nicer than the sport utility cycle that we built. It seems like some real tender love and care went into this build, and it's I think equally hilarious and awesome.
Well, I hope that I'm trying to find the Andrew. Thank you for sending this in to us. Indeed. Yes, indeed. Andrew, we're going to go out on a limb and we'll say you earned yourself a t-shirt with this one.
Oh, hey-o.
And I want to use this as the perfect opportunity
I know you
to say the new Highside, Lowside t-shirts have arrived. And if you would be so kind, dear Highside, Lowside audience, head over to RevZilla.com. We'll throw some links in descriptions and we'll put some stuff up on screen. There's 2 new Highside, Lowside t-shirts. There's a helmet fighting a helmet graphic. There's a street helmet and a dirt helmet. Kind of throwing it.
Are they fighting? I thought they're on the same team. But that just shows our personalities.
Well, then they're on the same team. We'll go the kindness. And then there's also a Highside, Lowside drinking game t-shirt. Indeed. So some new t-shirt designs have finally hit the website. And while people can win them, it would be great if anyone out there who wanted to support Highside, Lowside, grab themselves a t-shirt, threw it onto your next order of Motul, and just we thank you in advance.
Indeed. Well said. New t-shirts. And thank you again, Andrew, for sending in that tandem Rebel 250. That was a lot of fun. All right, Spurge, let's
comments episode.
Jump into the comments. I'm going to kick it off here, if you don't mind. For comment number 1, because I really like this one a lot. Comment number 1 comes from Dan via email. It says, are throttles built to operate in the wrong direction? How many riders have whiskey throttled, that is, accidentally twisted the throttle too much because they've been thrown backwards, and that situation compounds, and made a bad situation worse? Shouldn't they roll forward for safety? In other words, if you roll the throttle forward to make the bike go faster, then if you accidentally added too much throttle, you would then slow down. because of the forces would be pushing you backward away from the throttle, and then you would not whiskey throttle.
But then
I think in a vacuum, it's a pretty good question.
But what happens if you come on the brakes and then you're putting all that force and then you're rolling the throttle more aggressively?
You gotta refine your technique, I guess. Maybe that's the reason.
Well, so, did you find any official answers?
I did do a little bit of research. I called a contact at a motorcycle museum. This fella Matt, who was very helpful. If you're listening, Matt, thank you so much for your time. And he gave me some interesting information about throttles. He had never heard of a reverse operating throttle. That is a throttle that you roll forward to make the bike go. He pointed out that the first twist throttles were actually around 1904 or 05, early Harley-Davidson's, what he pointed to. Before that, throttles were often just a lever on the bar, right? Like you just sort of would like push this lever forward or
like
or
an
to the
ATV
side.
throttle, almost like a thumb throttle.
No, well, less sophisticated. It was more like, picture it like an old gear shifter on an old bicycle from like the 60s. It had those levers where you'd like reach over with your hand and you push up to get the thing to change. I think it was more like that, which you could still do while you're riding, of course, but it was much less integrated into the controls. Now, another buddy of ours, Connor, who's very much into old bikes. He's the fellow that loaned me the 1924 Harley-Davidson for my 100th episode of Daily Rider on the 100-year-old motorcycle. He is a very knowledgeable fellow about very old motorcycles. And he said he did have one instance where he found a reverse operating throttle. He said it was a San Diego police bike that he bought to fix up and resell. And the throttle operated backward. You rolled it forward to make the bike go forward. I think it was, what was it? I think it was a police bike from the 60s. So not even as old as I was expecting. Like I thought maybe from the teens or something like that. Anyway, so he did have one experience of a bike being set up that way. And as far as he understood it, when he bought the bike and the information that he got, it was for this exact reason that Dan is mentioning, which was whiskey throttle. They were trying to avoid that problem.
I have two questions. One, is your friend Connor loaning you any more bikes anytime soon for any other projects?
Yeah, he certainly is. He's loaning me a 1938 motorcycle for this mustache to go along with this.
For those of you that can't tell, Zach is stroking his mustache as he uses that voice. Secondly, I would just like to say to Dan, I still think, my concern here is that if you're rolling forward,
like more often, tell you why it's a dumb question.
No, it's not a dumb question, but I guess the same reason that like whiskey throttle, like if you come on the throttle too fast and it pulls you back and then you accelerate more, for more, what happens more often than that is that you're coming on the brakes and you're pushing forward on the handlebars as you apply pressure on the brakes. Your weight falls forward. And my thought here is that you're braking multiple times throughout a ride, and so like pushing that weight forward and is essentially rolling the throttle in the way that would accelerate the engine while you're trying to slow it down. So I don't know.
Here's what surprises me.
I think it's kind of good the way it is.
Here's what I thought when he asked this question. Motorcycles in the 19-teens and even into the 20s did not have front brakes at all. You just had a back brake. But you did have, for the time anyway, a surprising amount of power throwing you backwards when you accelerated. So the whole rolling the throttle forward to grab the front brake was not even a thing. And I think that's the reason it surprises me, is that in 1918 to 1925, they weren't doing this because they were doing a front brake. You didn't roll the throttle forward to get to the front brake. You never did that. And I know that's what we do now, but
but even if you're applying your rear brake, the momentum of the bike slowing down would cause you to naturally roll your hands forward or to push on the handlebar. Like I could see
I think we can move on to question number 2. Dan, I'm so sorry about my co-host telling you that this is a stupid question, because I actually thought it was a really good question. I think it was an intelligent, thoughtful
Is that how this episode's going to go? Is this how this episode's going to go?
Well, it can go this way if you want it to, Spurge. Like if you just want to tell all our listeners that they're dumb, then that's fine. But I would like to just
Dan, I never said that. Dan, I'm throwing out some thoughts as to maybe why they designed it that way, which is what I think your question.
Well,
you're ultimately salty. What did you have for lunch? Did you not eat lunch yet?
Salt.
Do you need a candy
ultimately bar? Here, I think the takeaway is that It's an interesting question, Dan. And with our little bit of research we did, found very, very little evidence that anyone had ever even tried that, which I think might be the more surprising thing, because people tried a lot of wacky stuff when it came to motorcycles, left-hand throttles and right-hand shift and blah, blah, blah. Anyway.
That's true. A lot of wacky stuff been tried.
Take us along, Spurge.
George, comment number 2, writes in and says, rewatching season 6, episode 9, discussions on failed European cruisers. Was it failed European cruisers or was it failed Japanese cruisers?
I think I have no idea. I don't remember beyond yesterday, but I think it was maybe the European blunders episode. I think that's what the that's what he's referring to. So
because we did talk about some of the bikes where they tried to take a Harley-Davidson approach to it.
Correct. Yes.
Goes on to say, majority of cruisers going for Harley's market share are failure. Majority of cruisers going for Harley's market share are failures. The imported cruisers that know they won't get Harley riders tend to do better. My question is, with Harley's waning popularity, the only segment of motorcycle growth being dual sports and adventure bikes, will the cruiser landscape be appreciably different in the future as a result of the market generally caring less about cruisers and Harley in a more general sense? He then goes on to ask some additional other questions,
more specific questions about will cruisers evolve to become different bikes? Basically, will people appreciate cruisers that are engineered better, quote unquote, better than Harleys, blah, blah, blah.
So from a starting standpoint, George, Harley-Davidson is still selling a lot of motorcycles, millions to billions of dollars worth of motorcycles. Even in their most recent public sharing, let's see here. I pulled up their Q1 sales data, and Lance actually wrote an article about this. You can read the nitty-gritty details in an article titled "Floundering and Fighting: Updates on KTM and Harley-Davidson." Of U.S. market share, Harley-Davidson claims that they have 36% of U.S. market share. Now, there is an asterisk attached to that number. Those are motorcycles over 601 cc's. So they're basically taking all scooters, dirt bikes, small displacement motorcycles out of the equation. And they're saying of 601 plus cc motorcycles sold, they own 36% of the market share. They then broke that down and said that they own 75% of the U.S. touring market and 53% of the total cruiser market. So the argument is that Harleys are still selling a lot of cruiser style motorcycles in both the touring category as well as the traditional cruiser category.
But to digest what you said there, Spurge, a little bit, that eliminates every 600cc. Well, not everyone. Most 600cc sport bikes are 599 cc's. So every Gixxer 600, every R6, all those bikes are eliminated from that sales data, which is probably pretty significant, especially historically. So I guess the 30-something% market share, we are not allowed to state this, but we can assume that the actual market share is less than that.
Correct. for total all two-wheeled vehicles sold in the United States. Yeah.
And so I guess to George's point, Harleys are he says Harley's popularity is waning. That's the word that he uses.
Right.
And that's, I think from a sales perspective and a market share perspective, technically true, right? The market share used to be higher for Harley. They're not in danger of going away, but waning is a fair characterization. Is that true?
I with what we're allowed to talk about. Yeah. I mean, part of this is that there's certain sales numbers that we're just not allowed to discuss that we might have, knowledge of, but
we're allowed to talk about market share, and Harley's market share at one point was higher than that. Yeah. I think that's
based on the numbers that they've presented, presumably. Yes.
So to answer George's question, Spurge, I'll put it to you first. Do you think that cruisers, I don't know. Do you think that I think maybe the core of his question here is, will motorcycles continue to develop away from cruisers to make them slightly more capable from a sporting standpoint and more upright and less quote unquote cruiser-ish?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think
that's what I wanted. I was just trying to drag your opinion out of you.
I think there's still a lot of people out there that really like the seating position, that like the style, that like the comfort. Like I wrote an article a while ago around like taking a Road King across Texas, and I was like, I get it. Like it slows me down a little bit. I'm not just blasting through corners. I'm just kind of stopping to smell the roses along the way. Right. But I think that there's I'm trying to think of there's a time and a place there's a season for everything, right? And while adventure bikes seem to be very popular right now, cafe racers and scramblers were really popular 10 years ago. And maybe their popularity is waning a little bit. And then before that, when you get into like the 90s and the 2000s, sport bikes were all the rage. And not that sport bikes aren't popular now, but maybe they're not as popular as something that they
certainly,
yeah.
I mean, and they're like, Japanese companies are definitely leaning into smaller, more attainable, more sensible sport bikes than the like horsepower wars of 15 years ago. So
exactly. I just don't know if it's, I just don't know. I understand that it's sometimes easy to go after Harley-Davidson as the, 11,000 pound gorilla in the room. But I don't necessarily know if cruisers in general and the people that really do like that riding position, and that engine style and character, I just don't know if that's going to, ever fully go away or evolve. We have standard motorcycles now. And I think that if people wanted a standard motorcycle, they'd go buy that, but they're not. They're buying Dynas and, Electras and, Road Kings and all that jazz.
Here's a hot take to wrap it up, Spurg. I agree with you. I don't think that those bikes will go away. And I don't think that people will stop liking Harleys or cruisers for being cruisers. And I think that the knockoffs of Harleys will continue to struggle because it's not a Harley-Davidson. And my take on it is that's fine.
Yeah,
that's fine. To each their own. If people are not buying cruisers that quote unquote make more sense or perform better because they just want a Harley-Davidson or they just want an Indian or they just want a quote unquote traditional American V-twin cruiser, then or touring bike or whatever, then great, teach their own. It's not what I would choose, but I don't think they should go away. I wouldn't like to see that.
Well, I have a question for you.
Okay.
So
is it comment number 3?
Nope. I have one final question for you about George's email. And I'm trying to find the name of it. So in a CTXP episode, you and Ari compared
R1200C.
Yes. So one of the other questions that George threw down here was, will BMW's finely engineered cruisers ever be appreciated? You did a CTXP episode where you compared a BMW cruiser against a Harley-Davidson.
Yeah, you're talking about the R18 BMW versus the Harley Softail.
And which one did you think was better?
The Harley-Davidson.
So, was BMW's finely engineered cruiser underappreciated, or was it just not a good motorcycle compared to the Harley-Davidson?
That particular one is not particularly well engineered. I don't want to spin out into whole. You should watch the CTXP episode. We explain all this.
Yes.
But basically that BMW cruiser, the R18, was designed to be a slightly bigger, slightly longer, slightly heavier, slightly more of everything Harley Softail. And, adding more patties to the cheeseburger doesn't necessarily make it better. And it just didn't work. The old BMW cruiser, the R1200C from 2001 or whatever that was, whenever they made that sort of Turn of the Millennium, I think, was, maybe more what George is referencing as a finely engineered cruiser. That was like a thoughtful, interesting, cruiser that sort of looked like a cruiser, but had all these features and actually handled really, really well. And that was one that people did not buy because it was not a Harley-Davidson. So BMW took a different tack with the new one. And they were like, what if we build a boat anchor with wheels that shakes horribly and doesn't go through corners? Would you buy it then? And it doesn't seem like people are buying that one either. So I just think that the mystique of Harley-Davidson, much to Harley's delight, is locked away in some sort of magic box in Milwaukee. And like, who knows? It's all self-perpetuating at this point. But like George, I said, I'm fine with it.
George, there's an article on Common Tread titled BMW versus Harley-Davidson, the chase for greatness. I think that article, if you have not already read it, George, has your name all over it. Zach, bring us in to comment 3.
Comment number 3 comes in from Kenton via email, and it reads, regarding your discussion in the Honda Goldwing Icons episode, you both mused that, quote, is there any challenge remaining in motorcycle touring, end quote, given the reliability of the Honda Goldwing motorcycle? In about 2005, I complained about the same thing to my brother-in-law, and he simply responded, quote, just leave that cell phone at home if you really want that extra challenge. It's funny, says Kenton, that most motorcyclists, including myself these days, will not consider leaving their smartphones at home. I guess we're not yearning that much for an extra challenge of touring or adventure riding without safety nets like roadside communication and machine reliability. What do you guys think? Would you take that trip? Would you leave your cell phone at home and just take a trip with your motorcycle rather than with your motorcycle and all of your contacts?
Kenton, I think Zach and I are both old enough to remember taking motorcycle trips without cell phones.
That's definitely true.
Zach, I guess, I'll let you go first here. What are your thoughts on taking a motorcycle trip without a cell phone? How would you handle that? And is this something that, you'd be afraid to do?
No, not something I'd be afraid to do. And I think that maybe what this boils down to is if you want to try to quote unquote disconnect from your life, from the world, and take a motorcycle ride and be away from everything, then I think that is a lever that you can pull. And I think it's borderline smart to do that. I think arguably the safest way to do something like that would be to have like a Garmin InReach, to have a spot tracker, to have some sort of like emergency device that you could press a button and send text messages to your loved ones, or heaven forbid, call a helicopter to come get you or whatever if you were horribly injured. But not be getting emails and not be getting phone calls and not be getting text messages and not like, just be away. Just when you stop and buy a sandwich or buy a bottle of Coke and you sit next to the side of the road and look at the ocean or look at a river or look at some mountains and take it all in, that you're not distracted by any buzzing or ringing or whatever. I think that's a totally viable thing to aspire to.
I think Kenton, Zach and I took a trip, Zach Airy and I took a trip last year with a group called the Wilderness Collective, and they forcibly take your cell phones away from you. So at the beginning,
you literally put them in a Pelican case and like they lock them away and they're gone.
And there's a master phone there. So if there's an emergency, like Zach said, they have a way of calling out. But for the 4 days that you're on the trip, you're not allowed to look at screens. And I found it to be incredibly refreshing.
Yeah, totally.
The first night you're sitting around the campfire and, nobody's pulling out their phone to snap photos of their tacos that they're eating. And like anybody cares about what our food looks like, but yet that's like a new thing that we've started doing in the past couple of years. But people were having engaging conversations and people were in the moment. People were getting to know one another in such an organic way that I feel like we've lost a little bit as a society. Even when we're going out to like dirt bike trips with friends, like, I'm guilty of it. My friends are guilty of it, where you're sitting around trying to have a conversation and people are posting photos from the day up on Instagram or whatnot. So I think getting rid of your phone is an excellent challenge to take. And, I would go a step farther than Zach in the fact that like, you probably don't even need a Garmin InReach. Like if you're taking a road trip, like you don't everybody that you're going to run into has a cell phone. So like if you truly do have an emergency, somebody else can call the police for you, or somebody else can call the ambulance for you. The last big trip that I really remember was I rode across the country and back in 2008. And
was that on Triumph Bonneville?
It was. Take a drink. And if you have the new Highside, Lowside engine sound, the new Highside, Lowside drinking game t-shirt, I believe that's on there. But I had like a little flip phone and I had a paper map with me And it was such an amazing trip because I carried a camera because my little stupid flip phone didn't have a camera built in. And I remember needing a tire and having to like call my uncle and say, hey, can you find me a Triumph dealership in Nebraska? And he's like, no, but I found one in Iowa. And then I just rode to this random dealership and showed up in Iowa and bought a tire. And like, if things went wrong, you had to figure out solutions in the moment. And if you wanted to find a place to camp, you had to pull over at a restaurant and ask if there was a camping site nearby. Or you looked for road signs that told you where a campsite was. It was such an amazing way to take a trip. To this day, it's still one of my top 3 favorite motorcycle trips of all time. And like, I've gone some cool places on RevZilla's dime. Zach and I have done some cool trips together. Ari and Zach have done a lot of cool trips together. Like, but sometimes the simplicity of just getting on a motorcycle, putting an actual camera in your tank bag and saying, I'll see you in a couple of days. Like, that's a whole sense of adventure in its own right, knowing that you have to kind of think for yourself a little bit. And there's not this built-in lifeline that can do everything for you in your pocket. So Kenton and anyone listening that is keen to this, I would challenge anyone out there to put their cell phone away, get on a motorcycle and hit the road for 5 days and see what happens.
There you have it, everybody. Thank you, Kenton, for the email and for the idea. I hope you inspire some other people, and I hope you take that trip. If I do say so myself. It's
actually the 20th. It's the 20th anniversary this year of me buying the Bonneville. Maybe that's what I'll do, Ken.
Okay.
Maybe you'll inspire me to take a trip with the Bonneville.
Comes in from Jay. Jay says, I've been a track rider for 15 plus years and run toward the front of the fast group. Right on, Jay. Okay, cool. Costs are always a concern when it comes to this hobby. Fair enough. So I tend to run slick tires that can be flipped on the rear to extend usage by an extra day. Why haven't I been able to find fronts that can also be flipped? Is there something about their construction or the forces placed on the front tire that makes flipping a front unsafe? Manufacturer websites are completely silent on the topic. Interesting question. You're running slick tires at a track day. Why not just change the rotation, flip them over? So if you have a track that you go left all the time, then you wear out the left side of the tire, flip it over, use the other side of the tire a little bit more before you have to buy a new tire. Not a bad question, Jay. And I know that our buddy Spurg reached out to our friends at Bridgestone for some information.
I did. And speaking specifically to some of the construction in your question, Jay, so that there are top tier race slicks that are directional, both front and rear are specific, or...
I mean, every tire is directional, right?
Right. Well, I guess in this case, he's saying that they can reverse some slicks, and that sometimes directionality isn't explicitly stated when it comes to slicks.
Okay.
But there were 2 main reasons that they got back to us and they said, hey, it could be for tire construction, something called single extrusion. If the tread is applied as a single extrusion, there's a joint. Directional tires are designed so that the highest torque, i.e. the braking for the front, the drive for the rear, pushes the joint closed. Running the tire backwards could actually try and pull the joint apart. You don't want that. So that's one. And then a second reason is that continuous band / ribbon construction, is that some tires use a continuous band of rubber avoiding a joint. And while this method is often used for rear tires, it doesn't automatically mean that the tire can be flipped on the rim. Designers use directional control to maximize performance in these engineering marvels. So even in the continuous band ribbon construction, where you don't have to worry about it pulling apart, it still might not be optimized for the best performance by flipping it around. So you'd probably be better off just going with, if you're looking for more life, you could consider a DOT track day type tire, which might give you better life without sacrificing too much performance.
Jay, I'm really sorry about him. I know he just told you to take a street tire to the track, and you're at the front of the fast group. You don't want a street tire at the track. I get it. I'm just a quick aside to tell you that I see you, Jay. I see you, and I'm not going to tell you to take a street tire to the track. I don't think you would. I'm just saying what Bridgestone recommended. Okay. Bridgestone went on to give examples of. I'm in the mood for hot takes today. I'm in the mood for hot takes today. This is exactly what a tire company would say.
What kind of coffee? What kind of coffee did you get? What kind of coffee? Like, what are you on today?
I don't drink coffee. I'm just high on mustache life, buddy. Here's the thing. This is exactly what a tire company would say. Don't flip the tire. You just got to buy a new tire, you know? Like, it doesn't seem like they have a good reason. The whole joint thing, totally fair. The tires are I talked to Ari about this, and he knows his way around a track day and tires. And he mentioned the joint as well. When tires are laid together and this joint exists, then you can pull them apart. Like we have seen that before. Ari mentioned specifically that he's seen a tire come apart at that joint. That being said, a track day is like the safest place to do all of this for a number of reasons, not least of which you're going to be looking at your tires all the time anyway. And if it starts to delaminate or come apart, you're probably going to see it. And Bridgestone is probably cursing me for saying this and saying, oh, no, that's way too dangerous. You don't want to do that. I'm not an expert in tires. I can't sit here and tell you, Jay, it's fine to flip your tires over. What I can tell you is that I would do that. I don't think you should worry about flipping a front tire over and running it on the opposite, especially if it's a slick. The main reason that people don't do that is rotational and is related to the rotation of siping in the tread pattern. But on a slick, there's no tread pattern. And even in that case, I've seen people flip DOTs. I sat next to a guy on a podium at an expert level club race, and he beat me. He was second and I was third. And his front tire was on backwards. And I said, why is your front tire on backwards? And he said, oh, I don't know. I guess they put it on backwards at the Dunlop tent or whatever. So I just don't see this being a huge problem. And it's something that I would certainly experiment if I was trying to pinch pennies and go to the track, especially if I was wearing through one side of the tire before the other one. Again, full disclosure, I am not legally allowed to give you the green light to do this, but I smell tire sales in Bridgestone's answer.
Well, I would just like to say that in no way does Zach's answer speak on behalf of the legal team here at RevZilla. Listen, I think Bridgestone gave us a pretty comprehensive answer as to like there are some reasons that they say that this could be a problem. But then again, there's things that I do with tires in the off-road segment that you're not supposed to do, and it works out just fine. Yeah. So Jay, I think some of this... In fact,
Spurgeon does some things with tires that are illegal in some states. We can't even talk about it here.
We don't talk about that in the podcast, Zach. Anyway, hopefully that helps to at least give you a little bit of education from what one tire manufacturer out there is kind of explaining. And then also you have Zach's hot take on how you could potentially just, throw caution to the wind. And if you're going to try and endanger yourself, a track is probably maybe the safer place to do it. So moving on to comment 5. This comes in from Tom. Tom says, as a beginner rider, I found that the Motorcycle Safety Foundation Basic Riders course missed out on teaching some fairly important riding fundamentals. I was curious if you had any insight into what other people have experienced and if you'd consider doing a quote unquote, what your beginner riders course doesn't tell you episode. For instance, MSF course didn't say anything about not downshifting while in a corner, and I found that out my own way as I made a left little trail in my underwear when the rear hopped out on me. So would you consider that episode? Zach, what do you think?
This is a tough one because I like when Spurgeon and I talked about this, and Chase and Spurgeon and I talked about this in pre-production, we were sort of like, how would we do an episode where we talk about everything that you need to learn and think about when you're riding a motorcycle? And ultimately that impasse that we found in our own creative process is exactly why the MSF doesn't try to teach you everything. And you discovered, Tom, while downshifting in a corner, that can upset the chassis of the bike. And your bike got all squirrely. And I can appreciate that you wish someone told you that, but, and I'm at risk at sounding really condescending here, and I'm sorry if that's the case, but that's sort of what learning to ride a motorcycle and indeed living life is about, right? We all learn how to do things by doing them. And you just cannot expect the MSF course in a 1 or 2.5 day session of classrooms and riding around a parking lot to teach you everything that you need to know about going through a corner or riding a motorcycle. That's just not going to happen. And I'm sure that that's the outlook that they have. They teach you the fundamentals. And at some point they drew a line, and downshifting in the middle of a corner was on the other side of that line of fundamentals. And right, Spurge? I mean, like, I don't
Tom,
know.
I think the moral here is that, like, as somebody that learned how to ride in an MSF course, I didn't leave that course thinking, well, I'm a professional rider now. I have no more learning I could possibly do. And again, I'm not trying to sound flippant, but this is why on this podcast, I have recommended many continuing education classes. I've recommended many books. There's plenty of learning you can continue to do. I think, Tom, if you want some additional education outside of the MSF class, Total Control, Lee Park's book, I love. I actually read it while I was taking the MSF class. It sits on my bookshelf to this day, and I still find things that I can glean from that. And it's the same way that I still go do track day education and I do off-rider education. And like, there's no shortage of, I've been riding for 20 years and you're still learning new stuff. So I think that it's important to note that the MSF basic riders course is just that. It is to get you comfortable on a motorcycle so that you're not going to the state trooper's office or your local DMV's office blindly trying to take a motorcycle safety test. It's giving you some of the fundamentals that you need.
And I would also like to add, Tom, that this is a really flattering moment for you, because Spurge and I, it might sound like we're making fun of you, and maybe we're
not at all.
But we're not, because there are lots of people that would have downshifted in the corner and the bike would have gotten all squirrely, and they would have just been like, oh, I guess the bike doesn't work right. Or I guess motorcycles are just dangerous. Or I guess I must have just hit sand or something. But instead you were introspective and you looked in at yourself and thought, I just didn't do that right. And I wish that someone had told me how to do it right. And this means that you're a curious, intelligent person. And I think that a lot of riders would benefit from having this attitude that you have. So I think the reason that Spurge and I chose this question to answer is that we feel like we want to reiterate what we have said on the podcast before about going to, reading books. Like Spurge already quoted a book. I just went to California Superbike School and, did a track day where they talked about motorcycle dynamics and how a front end works and how, like, what rake and trail means. And so some of this stuff is stuff that I've already known because I already know because I've been a motorcyclist my whole life, and I've been curious, and I've been educated by people much smarter than I am. But I learned a ton. It was super fun. And it wasn't necessarily about dragging your elbow at a track day. It's about learning the dynamics of a motorcycle. So there's lots and lots of things that you can go and do and to try to get better. I think the fact that you want to know those things is great.
And if you want to learn something and you don't feel like reading a book, you can check out one of Aries' more recent episodes of the shop manual entitled "The Life-Saving Skill That Safety Classes Don't Teach." I'm not gonna spoil what the episode's about. So if you want to know what that life-saving skill is that's not taught in a class, check out Aries' episode of the shop manual. And Tom, again, thank you for writing in. Thank you for being honest. This is a great email. Agreed.
This reminds me, we had a buddy recently. I don't know if I told you this, Spurge, and I'm not going to name names, but we had a buddy recently who we were in a grocery store together, and a mutual friend. We were buying bananas for a video shoot we were doing here at RevZilla, and there was a stack of like 6 bananas, and I think it was Spencer reached over and tore 2 bananas off and just kept 4. And it's like, we only want 4 bananas, and our buddy was like, I never knew that you could do that. I thought if you wanted 4 bananas, you had to find. He's like, I've never torn apart bananas in a grocery store, and that sounds.
He spent his whole life eating more bananas than he actually needed.
Yeah, or just but he was like, I want 2 bananas, but the smallest bunch I can find is 3, so I guess that's what I'm getting. And I think that it's just this is what it reminds me of. Is sort of we're all learning in life here. You might feel silly for asking a question sometimes, but I appreciate that you asked the question, Tom, and don't let our snide commentary get in the way of you being a better motorcyclist.
I hope that you didn't find it as snide commentary either. I mean, to an extent, Tom, I think it was a good question that we tried to answer honestly, and hopefully your question.
Bottom line.
Stop it. Stop putting yourself down. You answered it with humor and grace. But hopefully, Tom, your question helped to educate some other people out there that are just starting their journey and maybe, help to level set some expectations for them. So thank you.
Comment number 6 comes in from Kamikaze on Spotify. This is in reference to season 10, episode 1, first episode of this season. Exciting new motorcycle releases in 2025. I believe the old Silver Fox Lance was our guest on that episode. Kamikaze says, and I quote, "Okay, so-called quote unquote experts, you completely missed the new Harley-Davidson Pan America ST, which I thought would be right up your alley. It's supposed to be a much more sport touring oriented Pan America, but it doesn't sound like Harley-Davidson's promoting it very much. I think it's a good move toward getting more people interested in Harley, and if it's any good, and I would love to know your thoughts." So Spurgeon, we're supposed to be motorcycle experts, and there was one bike that we missed in our exciting new motorcycle releases of 2025 episode.
Well, I mean, maybe that's because we didn't think it was that exciting. I think the Harley-Davidson Pan America is a bike that we talked about very favorably, both on Common Tread and in the podcast before. The Pan America ST, to be very clear, gets a 17-inch front wheel. Zach and I were actually looking from the factory. It gets a different tire size on the rear. It gets a 180/55 on the rear. But I'm pretty sure, to Zach's point that we were making in pre-production, that the actual wheel size hasn't changed. So to that end, it gets a 17-inch front tire, and it loses about 3/4 of an inch of suspension travel. Those are the only differences I could find over regular Pan America. Now, neither Zach and I have ridden an ST to date, for what it's worth, but I can't imagine.
Would you say you're excited to ride one, Spurge?
I would imagine I'm as excited to ride an ST as a regular Pan America. I can't.
Right, it's the same bike.
It's the same bike. You know,
it's the same bike.
And I rode the Pan America. The Pan America was a good touring adventure motorcycle. I see the, and it probably ST still is the same. Yeah,
17-inch wheel. Who cares?
Yeah.
Main reason I wanted to answer this question is to point out that we're not every time we talk about, you know, exciting new motorcycle releases or like new bikes in 2026 or bikes we're excited about in 2027. As we've said many times, this is not a comprehensive list of literally every single thing that happened. Sometimes there might be a bike that we wish we talked about. So you don't have to laugh at us for missing it. But we welcome the criticism. But
was that in reference to his emoji, his little laughing emoji?
Yeah, his little laughing emoji, because he thinks we're idiots. And I suppose the feeling is mutual, because we didn't really think that was a very interesting motorcycle. But it is a fair call out that it was a new motorcycle released in 2025, and I think, to Kamikaze's credit, it does seem like a bike that we would be excited about. So the fact that we're not is maybe the big surprise.
You are excited about the one that they're racing in the hooligans class in Moto America, are you not?
A naked one. It's basically a naked Pan America with a it's a 1250cc Bronx it's a secret motorcycle that no one's ever ridden. It's so cool.
All right.
I'll get my hands on it.
You'll get there one day, Zach.
Kids.
You'll get there one day. You're going to get on that Moto America bike. All right. Comment number 7 comes in from David via email. It says, I'm fearful that I'm losing my love of motorcycling. I've been riding over the past decade and always seem to stick with the same 636 platform. That's a Kawasaki ZX 636, ZXR 636. He currently owns a 2023 ZX6R. I ride it as much as possible, 2-up about 30% of that time.
We'll circle back to that.
Oh my God. But I'm in the middle of starting a business, and my plans of tracking the bike on a regular basis just aren't happening. I'm looking to replace the motorcycle with something that keeps the sport bike thrill, but is more useful. I love the Aprilia Tuono V4, but the pillion seat is horrendous, says the guy putting his passenger on a ZX6R. Help me before I trade it in on a BMW GS and give up on fun. LOL. Zach, first question I have for you, would trading it in on a BMW GS be quote unquote giving up on fun?
No.
As you stroke your mustache?
No, it wouldn't be, but I get it. David doesn't want to buy a GS yet. It's like, I forget. Yes. There's an old kind of like, not even that old, whatever. I don't remember the first time I heard it, 10 years ago, something like that. But, there's a sort of a colloquialism in motorcycling that's like every bike you buy is just your own journey toward getting a GS, because that's where everyone ends up. So I think that's kind of David's feeling here, right? Is sort of like, it's not that he's anti BMW GS. He's like, I'm just not, I just don't want to do that. I think that's fair. The good news is, if you like 600cc sport bikes, like a Kawasaki ZX6 that you have now, David, there are lots of options for something that is high performance and more comfortable for a passenger. And this is, do you have any top examples that you are excited about? Oh, you want me to actually give out information and like back up my opinion? Well, first bike comes to mind is a BMW S1000 XR, which is actually just a viciously fast sport bike, kind of hiding in sheep's clothing to some extent. The foot pegs are high, the engine's buzzy. It's like, it is a raw and like I said, vicious sport bike that is actually kind of upright and has a windshield and will be more comfortable and will undoubtedly be more comfortable for a passenger, because as Spurge pointed out, you'd be hard pressed to find a motorcycle that would be less comfortable for a passenger than a Kawasaki ZX6 or any 600cc sport bike. And if you want to take a BMW S1000 XR to a racetrack, poof, it'll blow your hair back. Let me tell you, if that's too dear, as Ari would say, too expensive, too much horsepower, too much money, whatever. There's sort of like a cascade of bikes below that follow a similar sort of recipe, but a little less red pepper. You get your Triumph Tiger Sport 800, which is pretty sporty bike, pretty upright. You got your BMW F900 XR. You get your Kawasaki Versys 1000, which is like a little bit more touring oriented, but like plenty of stomp from that engine and plenty of comfort. And these are good suggestions, are they not, Spurge?
The Triumph Tiger Sport 800 was one on my list for David.
Okay.
About 113 odd claimed horsepower, 62 foot-pounds of torque. Like, it's going to be as peppy as your ZX6R, and maybe give you a little bit of a different engine characteristic. If you've been riding inline fours your whole existence, like there's something out there that might, blow you around a little bit, in a different way and have you have fun. The other bike that I was thinking of, if you want to try and keep, it's not going to be as comfortable for your passenger as going with like the Tiger Sport, but another one from Triumph is the 765 Street Triple, the Street Triple R or Street Triple RS. Both of those bikes will be
that's the foundation for the Tiger Sport 800.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So both of those will be, a little bit more upright, sport naked for you. Still a lot of fun. So I was with you, Zach, in the Triumph area, and then I like the BMW recommendation a lot.
Or Multistrada V2. Or
Multistrada V2 is a good one.
If you get by a used one, that's a pretty sporty bike, pretty fun. Could take it to a track day. Kind of depends how good you are on the racetrack. But like sporty, peppy, fun, comfortable. I don't know. That's the cool. The motorcycle market is designed for this question, David.
Yeah.
And if you want a tonal V4, and you want to get something like a hyper naked, like or super naked, whatever. Like, you're not going to find a lot of passenger comfort there. But again, to Spurge's point, almost anything is going to be.
That's what I don't understand.
Better than the 60s.
Who did you find
seriously
that is riding two up with you on a ZX6R 30% of your riding time? Hopefully you put a ring on it. Like, hopefully you married them, because like you're not going to find anyone better. Like, full stop.
You're probably not going to find anyone more tolerant.
There you go. Yeah.
Anyway. Well, yeah, I hope that those suggestions get you somewhere, David. I think it's a fun question. And like I said, I'm like almost envious of how many options you have. Like you have a sport bike, you want something sporty that's a little bit more comfortable. There's so many options. It's a great time to be alive for you, David.
It's a great time to be alive for any motorcyclist right now. If you can't find a motorcycle you enjoy, you're not looking in the right place.
And speaking of great times to be alive, I would say it's a great time for an ad. Don't you think, Spurge?
I cannot wait to hear what the ad says today.
All right, everybody. Thanks for bearing with us. We are moving along through the comments and questions you all have sent in. Thank you. Let's just take a quick pause here. Thank you for sending us so many emails, comments, questions, concerns, suggestions on hairstyles, whatever you sent in. Thanks so much for taking the time to send us a note. It's heartwarming, frankly, even when you have incredibly stupid things to say that we would never feature in an episode like this. It's nice to hear that people are listening and enjoying the podcast. So thank you.
I would say to that end, we've done a lot of comments episodes at this point, at least 9 of them. And this was probably the most enjoyable. We had a lot of comments to choose from. Like sometimes we're like, oh, we got to get in there and really kind of look for the comments. We were turning comments away. There were a lot of great Spotify comments. There were great contributions via Apple reviews as well as on YouTube, and then people sending us Highside, Lowside emails. But this next comment from Valley Boy 2012 or 212 came in versus or via Spotify. Zachary
Valley Boy says, and I quote, "This is my first time commenting, and I'm wondering, have you ever taken a solo road trip?" Hold your horses.
I got my glass ready, baby.
I know, hold up. Valley Boy says, "I'm 32. I have a Goldwing from 2008, and I want to take some trips. However, I feel nervous about venturing out on my own. I'm located in Palm Springs and would like to ride up and do Sequoia, Kings Canyon, and Yosemite this summer. Any tips? Question mark. Well, everybody, you just sit back. We're going to wind Spurgeon Dunbar up here on solo road trips, and we're going to let him play."
So one of the things that I want to start off by saying is that there's a great Tom Petty song called "Crawling Back to You." And in that song, there is a lyric where he says, "Most of the things that I worry about never happened anyway." And I'm throwing that out there.
Yeah.
I'm throwing out there for you, Valley Boy, because most of the things that you're probably afraid of with a road trip, aren't going to happen. You're not going to be attacked by a bear. You're not going to get, kidnapped. Your motorcycle is not going to catch on fire. You have a relatively new Goldwing. There are some things that you can do to make sure that you have a successful trip. Hang on.
Before you get into that, here's my question. As I'm in such a spicy mood today, if you have a 2008 Goldwing and you're not taking road trips, what are you doing with the thing? You just riding around town? Or?
What are you doing with your life? If you have a Goldwing and you're not road tripping?
That's not what I said. That's not what I said.
No, that's what I said. What are you doing with your life if you have a Goldwing and you're not taking it on road trips?
Well, I jokes aside, if you have a 2008 Goldwing and you're not taking long road trips, you're going to be thrilled at how good your motorcycle is for doing that. If you've just been riding to the grocery store and to, softball with your friends or whatever.
Try to, this is a guy that should have had a Bonneville because it's not appropriate for road trips, but it's great for just riding around Palm Springs. Valley Boy, I would say get the bike, make sure the bike is serviced, make sure you know how to plug a tire, and make sure you have a tire kit with you or you have a AAA card in your wallet. That being said, a little bit of planning goes a long way. Try and pick some points on a map. If you're nervous about it, you can, book some hotel rooms ahead of time. Think about 250 miles a day as a good, a good round number. Right. Maybe with the Goldwing, you can stretch up to 300 if you want to. But
sure. But
where do you want to go? Where do you want to see? And for those of you that aren't familiar with the areas in California that Valley Boy's talking about, Sequoia, Kings Canyon, Yosemite, they're all doable for a first road trip, right? My first solo road trip, I had been riding for about 3 or 4 months, and I rode up to Maine. I made the mistake of doing 780 miles in one day, and I was miserable for the second half of that ride. But I was young and stupid, and at 22, I wasn't going to be told no. And I didn't have the right gear because in Maine, even in August, the temperatures drop into the 30s at night. I didn't know that. I was freezing by the time I got up to where I was going. I got caught in the rain. I didn't have any rain gear. I had an old cheap helmet that kept fogging up. But it was the most amazing experience I've ever had in my entire life. So I was cold, I was tired, I was wet. And for 4 days, I was happier than I had ever been before in my life. So I guess all I want to say is that even when things go a little bit wrong on a motorcycle road trip, you still have a great time. And it's just one of the joys of having a motorcycle is a solo road trip. Zach, do you have anything that you want to add to encourage Valley Boy to get out there?
No, you covered it. I think, it's easy for us to sit here and say, just go for it. But I'm glad that you were specific, Spurge, about, look, check the weather, check your route, check the traffic, learn to know how to plug a tire. And then from there, kind of like we talked about with Kenton's question about taking a road trip with no cell phone, just decide how, figure out how much tolerance you have for going out there on your own, like you say you feel nervous about venturing out on your own. And that's totally fair. But I think that what Spurgeon is driving at here is he thinks, and I tend to agree with him, that when you do venture out on your own, you're going to be filled with satisfaction and joy from doing that. And if you're not, you can always turn around and go home. And everything else is just sort of your own judgment for how much extra gear you think you need to bring, and how, if you feel like you want a spot tracker or some sort of like satellite tracker, or if you're just like cool with your cell phone, like it's just decide what you think you're comfortable with. And I'd say just work up to higher mileage and work up to more unknown roads, and just start off with the basics. I think you're going to have a blast.
If that 2008 Goldwing has a 6-disc CD changer, grab a copy of Tom Petty's Wildflowers record, spin it ahead a few songs to Crawling Back to You, crank it up and hit the road. I think you're going to have a great time. And that's just good advice for anyone out there looking to take a motorcycle road trip.
Indeed. All right. Comment number 9 comes in from Max via email. Whose turn is it? Am I reading this one? You reading this one?
You can read it. Yeah, read Max's email.
Max says, I spend a bunch of time fantasizing about buying another motorcycle, one that is older, perhaps with more character and looks, bought perhaps more for character and looks, than having all of the modern conveniences. Thing is, I don't yet know exactly what I want that older bike to be. I live, ride, and commute in London, England. Thus, I don't have a garage where I could work on a bike. So here's my challenge for the team and my podcast idea. For each of the major motorcycle manufacturers, what is the earliest year that I could buy any of their bikes, assuming it's in decent condition? And so long as I keep up the maintenance, have trouble-free riding experiences. Based on Zach's experience in Wyoming, I'm guessing the 70s Honda. And Spurgeon, I fear this is one episode where you're not going to bring up KTM.
I'm not, but as somebody that has owned a 70s Honda, I think the idea that you're going to be able to buy a vintage motorcycle and have a quote unquote trouble-free riding experience is probably not realistic. The reality. Like you're going to, part of having an older motorcycle is that things do tend to go wrong more often than a newer motorcycle. So you, in your email here, Max, you said, what's the earliest year that I could buy any manufacturer's motorcycle, parentheses, assuming it's in decent condition, close parentheses. And that's really the root of your question here. And we cannot tell you what year a motorcycle will be for it to be in good condition, because that's not how that works. And this is a content throw to Aries' recent episode of the Shop Manual, where he covers high mileage. And he talks about all the different things that you can worry about or need to look out for when you're buying a used bike. And ultimately what it comes down to is that the mileage number on a bike doesn't mean that the bike is in great condition because it has low mileage, or in bad condition because it has high mileage. There are so many different things that make a difference there. And every single motorcycle and owner and reseller and situation is just different. Yeah. And as somebody, I mean, Zach and I both have, at the time of recording, I have a 20-year-old motorcycle in my garage. Zach has a 19-year-old motorcycle in his garage, and things have gone wrong with it. You know, I've got 80-something thousand miles on the Bonneville now, and I've changed the ECU, and I've changed the reg rec, I've changed the pickup condenser. Like, things break and you replace it. But like
I've changed 2 of those 3 things on my bike. Too,
right. You know, I think an example that I throw out for you is when I bought the VFR, I bought a 99 VFR and it had 46. The mileage was in the 40,000s, right? So I knew I was buying a well-loved motorcycle. And the guy that I bought it from said, hey, I've always maintained it, yada, yada, yada. Great. Well, within the first, I don't know, 2 days, I was like, there's something wrong with how this bike handles. The steering head bearings were completely shot. There was like a notch in them and the bike wanted to lock in a straight line.
Classic.
So like I replaced the steering head bearings, threw a new set of tires on it, and it was great for like another 10,000 miles. And then the reg on that bike shot and I put a new regulator rectifier in it. And then it was great for another, presumably, I mean, I sold it not long after that, but even at a bike where that was 15 years old, it was a Honda that had been well maintained. It was, 20 years old when I sold it. Things happen, things go wrong. And a little bit of what you're doing here is figuring out how much due diligence you're willing to put into your motorcycle ownership.
So you called out the Honda that I rode across Wyoming on dirt roads, which was a Honda. We still have it around, actually. It's a Honda XL 350, which is a little early dual sport Honda single cylinder air cooled bike. Pretty simple. One of the things, and my lovely friend Ari rode on that trip with me across Wyoming on a 1969 Yamaha DT1, which is a 250cc 2-stroke dual sport, sort of comparable motorcycles. But I bring this up because the DT1 we learned in that over the course of that experience, while it was a very resilient machine, was clearly just built in 1969 to be like beat to hell and then like left still hot in a ditch. And then Yamaha was like, just go back and buy another one. And then just like have fun next summer. And it was like, it was almost like this consumable item. Whereas the Honda that I was riding was much, much, not more thoughtfully put together, but sort of like built to last, I guess. Like it had much higher quality metal used in some of the engine cases. It had like gaiters around the fork legs. It had gaiters around little rubber covers around the lever pivots. It had all this stuff that you could tell it was just sort of like this bike, if maintained, is meant to last a really long time. And the reason I bring that up is that those are 2 seemingly very similar motorcycles from a very similar era in motorcycling, built to do a very similar thing. And the way that they were built and sold was clearly very different. And that just goes to show that like everything is different. Every little thing, like I said before, every little situation is going to be different. So doing the research on how the bike was, how the bike was built, what the reliability record is, and even how it was marketed will have everything to do, or will have something to do with the way the bike was treated, used, and owned.
And in fairness to the Honda here too, like you and Ari put a lot of work into those bikes before you went. And then when you got back from that,
Ari put a lot of work into those bikes.
Ari, I was trying to be kind to you. Ari put a lot of work into those bikes before you left. And then after you came back, they needed parts replaced, and you obviously rode them pretty hard, but like, there's constant upkeep with certain bikes that are getting older. And I think that's really the takeaway here, Max, is that if you're truly looking for a complete trouble-free riding experience, that's not part of the mystique here, right? And like, I think it's also, remember that a bike made in 2000 is 25 years old. Like you're talking about bikes from the 70s, like those are now 50, 55 years old. Like we're just, even if you wanted something where you're like, hey, I want something a little bit older, you could probably look at a bike from the 90s or the early 2000s, find something that's going to give you a completely different and unique riding experience compared to a modern day bike that's 30 years newer. And, maybe have a little bit more of a trouble-free experience than something in the 70s.
Yeah, 100%. I think that you, Max, will perhaps you've already watched at this point Ari's episode of the Shop Manual on High Mileage. Where do we actually know what the title is of that? I should look it up just so we can give an actual title. But anyway, it's about high mileage motorcycles and what to look for. I think you will learn a lot from that, Max, if you have not already. It is a good question. though we will not be doing a full podcast on it. But thank you for writing in. Spurjo, why don't you take comment number 11?
Comment number 11.
And for those of you wondering, didn't you skip? Weren't you on comment number 9? Did you skip comment 10? We did. We skipped it. We're moving on to comment number.
But we kind of answered it in comment number 9.
We did.
So hopefully, yeah.
Trust us here. Trust the process, everybody.
Jeff, if you're listening, hopefully that answers your question too. Comment number 11. I was recently involved in an incident that was 100% out of my control.
Okay.
Okay. Riding home from work, a pickup truck in the oncoming lane ejected 2 plastic lawn chairs that were unsecured in the bed. I blasted through these things, somehow stayed upright, and I rode it out. My 2024 Transalp was rideable, and we made it home. However, the resulting damage put the bike in the shop for over a month and cost me my $500 deductible. Total damage was $2,300. As a lifetime rider, I am not deterred by this incident, but it did get me thinking about when it's time to consider hanging it up. Have either of you guys had something like this happen to you fully outside of your control? What was your takeaway, Dale?
Dale. Good. This is a good question. I like this question.
Dale, this is a great question. Yeah. Do you want to go first, Zach?
I think you should circle back to the beginning of Dale's email where he says, I was recently involved in an incident that was 100% out of my control.
Dale, I'm not going to tell you that you have control over every incident. But what I will do is I'll throw myself under a bus because I actually had something very similar happen to me. I had been riding for a few years. I had just moved to Los Angeles. I was coming down the 110 freeway and I was aghast when a 5-gallon bucket fell off of the truck in front of me. I was able to swerve enough to miss hitting it head on, but it must have been filled with like plaster or concrete or something because it was hard as a rock. It hit my shift lever and cracked the seal on my shift case into the engine case, dumped oil everywhere. I was able to limp it home. It too cost me my $500 deductible, weeks away from me in a shop. And it was at a time where $500 was an insane amount of money for myself. I was a first-year high school teacher, and it was my only mode of transportation, so I had no way of getting back and forth. So I say that to say I actually had something very similar experience. I actually had a very similar experience happen to me. I do not think that it was 100% out of my control. I think I was probably following too close to the truck in front of me. I was not giving myself enough room to maneuver. And so I am saying that I learned from that experience that, you know, I am accountable if things like that happen, if there's obstacles in the road, and that if I'm riding to a point where I can't avoid certain obstacles, then maybe I need to change my riding style or slow down a little bit. I'm not saying that this incident that you were in is exactly the same as mine, but I am saying, is there anything here that you could learn about how you were riding to maybe avoid obstacles in the lane next time?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's a pickup truck coming the other way, plastic chairs fly out. I'm not really sure what you're supposed to do. But I hope, Dale, that you, to Spurgeon's point, I hope that you have looked within yourself and said, like, could I have been at a different point in the lane? Could I have been paying more attention to the cars coming the other way to see if there's debris falling off them, blah, blah, blah. Just to throw it out there. We're not throwing you under the bus, Dale.
No, no. And maybe it was 100%. You were just coming down and it was quick. Yep. It happened. And you know, but it sounds like you were upright and it sounds like you had the riding ability to push through that.
Yes. And that's something that I would like to call out, which is that you blasted through the plastic chairs and maybe you didn't mean to. Maybe you would have swerved if you felt you had more time. This is something that I was taught early in my driving career when I first got my license. I don't remember who it was. I think it might have been my dad talking about a situation where something had happened. Something fell into the road ahead of a car and the person swerved so aggressively that they went off the road and crashed the car into a ditch or rolled over or whatever. And like, they weren't injured or anything, but ultimately the thing that was in the road that they would have hit would have just hit the car and they would have kept driving and everything would have been fine. But they like freaked out so much that they created an accident that wouldn't have been. And so I don't mean to apply to broad a stroke to your situation, Dale, but I kind of appreciate that these chairs came out. I like to think if the chairs landed and you were sort of like, well, I could swerve over into the ditch if I wanted to, or I could just hit this plastic chair on my Transalp and like, it's just a plastic chair and it's going to be fine. I think you kind of made the right call. And ultimately,
you probably ultimately saved yourself. I know that you had a $500 deductible for your insurance, but to Zach's point, one of the takeaways that I had with a conversation with one of my insurance agents at one point in time or another was that if a deer, we have a lot of deer in Pennsylvania, if a deer jumps out in the road, if you swerve to miss the deer and hit a tree, you're at fault. If you hit the deer, ultimately potentially killing the deer, it is not seen as a your fault accident. So you could have done, I don't know what insurance you have or how their regulations fall, but
he could have saved himself, what is it, $1,800?
No, I'm saying is he probably did save himself $1,800. If he would have swerved and then hit another car, he could have been more at fault. So Dale, I think you did the right thing for what it's worth.
Let me just say, we're not telling you to hit the deer intentionally. We're not telling you that you should always just run over whatever's in the road so that you don't swerve away. I'm just saying we all can be thoughtful about debris in the road. What we should do, Spurge, is circle back to Dale's question, which is, have you ever had this happen before? Which it sounds like you have, Spurge. And what was your takeaway? And I guess before we circle back to your takeaway, which you sort of covered to some extent, I would like to say that I think it's important that as motorcyclists, we all think about the risks that we're taking on a regular basis. If this happened to you, Dale, and you said that you are not deterred by this incident, but it did get you thinking about when it's time to consider, quote, hanging it up. And I think that we're all making that judgment call all the time, or we should be. If you're just blindly getting on a bike because it's what you've always done, or because it feels like what you want to do, or you're worried you're going to be late if you don't, that's not the right reason. You should be doing it because it brings you something that other transportation doesn't, or it is, quote unquote, worth it to you on the grand scale. That's important, I think.
Yeah. And I think that there's really, I have nothing more to add about my experience other than the fact that like it was
hilarious.
It did. No, it was not hilarious.
Sorry.
It was
sorry.
Really, it wasn't hilarious. I mean, we can laugh about it now, but at the time it did put me in a bad spot, and it gave me some things to consider. It was the first time that I had a real incident on the road. Like I said, I was very much like Dale, where I didn't crash the bike, but it definitely caused some damage. Dale, Zach actually made a really good point when we were researching this. There's an article entitled "Open Letter to a Scared Rider" that Ari Henning wrote, and it's a good little 800-word piece from Ari. But really, the thing that Zach made a comment on that I think it's really apropos here is that the comment section is a great place for you to potentially read through. The comment section on Open Letter to a Scared Rider is a lot of people sharing their stories about incidents that they've dealt with. And Lance actually pinned a comment to the top listing out a whole variety of different articles around, some
of the data,
advice and data around motorcycle accidents and things like that.
Right. Yeah. It's a good little piece from Ari. But yeah, I think you might find some similarly concerned voices in that comment section, Dale, that are also living in your head. And I hope that the commentary community can offer some thought-provoking ideas or musings or perspectives. So check it out if you can.
All right. Do you want to take comment 12, Zach, from Scott? Or do you want me to
Sure.
read it?
Scott writes in via email. Said, a few episodes ago, Spurgeon mentioned in passing about hacking up or customizing a pair of motorcycle boots and finding them still functional. Having bought a pair of Alpine Star's SMX-S boots a few years ago and finding them uncomfortable on my rippling muscular calves, the boots sat dormant. This is a great email. I couldn't part with them, though they constantly mocked me in a dusty corner of my shop. Inspired by his brief story, I hacked up my boots with a saw to a nice.
We'll add a picture here. He sent us a picture.
We got a picture here. They are now the most comfortable motorcycle boots I've ever worn over 34 years of riding. So thank you, Spurgeon, for inspiring me to be brave enough to take a chance and customize my gear. This is obviously not a question, just a story, but we do have some things we want to say about it. Hopefully, if you're watching on YouTube or Spotify, you can see the photo of Scott's hacked up boots. But basically, he just like sawed off the top of these Alpine Stars boots and made them more comfortable. Spurjo, I know you had some comments here.
I wanted to start off by saying that I did not go to the extreme that Scott went to, where it looks like he cut the boots in half. But if it works for him,
the top 40% of the boot.
Yeah, I cut off like an inch that was getting caught underneath the seat because the boots were too tall. But either way, I think it's great, Scott, that you are modifying gear. And I think that this is a takeaway that, like, yes, did Scott change the level? If you're watching this and you're seeing the picture and you're thinking, oh, he made the boots less safe.
Those things.
He butchered them. But like, he essentially made a pair of low height riding shoes out of a tall height boot instead of wasting the boots that he had. So like, Scott, that's awesome. I think it's an important note because we get motorcycles and we talk about, you have to modify a motorcycle to fit your riding style or your ability, right? Like don't be afraid to change the clickers for the suspension or lift the shift lever up if you're having trouble getting your foot underneath. Motorcycle gear has a lot of opportunity for this. And most recently, I bought a pair of Leatt MTB 4.0 light gloves. Now, MTB in the motorcycling / bicycling world is mountain bike. So they're a pair of Leatt mountain bike light gloves. I bought them for mountain biking, but I found that I really like them for dirt biking as well. The gloves have one main flaw, however. The Velcro, the male side of the Velcro was on the outside strip, and it was just jaggedly cutting into my wrists and causing a lot of discomfort. And I was like, I really like the gloves. They're very comfortable aside from this Velcro. I can either send them back and just, complain to Leatt in a review and wait for them to change it, 12 months down the road if they listen to what I say. Or I can see about adapting them. And what I ended up doing was I took a razor blade, I cut back the stitching on the Velcro, the male side, cut it in half, and then use super glue to seal where I cut the stitching, completely fix the problem. Now, should I have to buy a $76 pair of gloves, take a razor blade and some super glue to it to get it to work? No. But they were exactly the glove that I wanted for every other reason. There was no other glove that I really liked for the same reasons of being able to use it for mountain biking and dirt biking. I found a solution, and with 15 minutes, a razor blade and some super glue, I made a pair of gloves that I really like. And then I bought another pair and did the same thing to it. So I had a backup. So I'm just saying, Scott's email, I think, speaks to maybe some of the ingenuity you can take out there. If there's something that you like about a piece of gear, there might just be little tweaks that you need to, go to your sewing machine for. Zach, what are your thoughts here? Anything that you want to add about boots that you've cut in half or gear?
I actually razor bladed some boots recently because there was a little, not a seam, but like a bulge of plastic or something inside the boot that was like digging into the top of my toe, and it was so uncomfortable. And I was just kind of like, you know what? I'm just gonna.
What was it? Was it like a piece of material?
It was just like, I think it was where the pad from the outside had been stitched onto the outside of the boot. It had squeezed together a little pad of plastic or textile or something like that inside the boot and made a little like crease. And my toe, like my big toe cuticle, was like falling right on it, and it was just like so uncomfortable. And I just reached in there. I couldn't even see. It's like way in the toe of the boot, so I couldn't even really see it, but I could feel it. And I reached in there with a razor blade and just like sniped it off. And then I checked to make sure that the seam on the outside had not been damaged, and it wasn't coming apart at all. I just like clipped off this little protrusion, and it's way, way better. I'm so glad I did it. So yeah, I don't know.
There you have it. So hopefully that inspires you. Get inside your boots. Start carrying razor blades in your motorcycle tank bag, so you can fix your gear from time to time.
Yeah, I think it's the right attitude to have. So yeah.
Well, I'm glad it worked out for you, Scott. I'm glad you found a little bit of life out of an expensive pair of boots that were otherwise uncomfortable for you to wear. And for those of you out there looking for a great recommendation for mountain bike / dirt bike gloves, check out the Leatt mountain bike 4.0s and just get a razor blade ready.
And just call Spurge. He's happy to doctor them for an additional $76.
I would do it for cheaper than that. $54.95. I will modify your gloves for you.
All right, what's next here, Spurge?
So I think we are going to hit email from Jennifer. Jennifer wrote in and said, "The day I got my license, I wanted a Goldwing in my 20s. I know, I'm weird. So I found the 1980 GL 1100. And then around 2018, I bought a 5th gen 2003 GL 1800. It was a fun bike. Loved the handling. But for all the complaining people do about how hot Harley-Davidsons are, I found the Goldwing to be worse than my Road King." That rhymes, Jennifer. I like what you did there. All of the fairings, they were so nice in the rain and the extreme cold, but it caused an unbearable pocket of heat from my toes to my waist. I put Baker air wings on it, modified it, all the things. Nothing worked. I thought maybe the 6th gen would be the answer to my problems. However, it still retained heat, and I felt like the Road King, decked out with fairings and trunk at that point, was just more fun to ride. Now I'm in my late 40s, and when most people are steering towards a Goldwing, I'm done with them. I'd love to add a Goldwing to the stable again, but in response to your ponderance as to where the wing goes next, if long-term Goldwing lovers can be turned away because of all the heat, an air condition must be in the next evolution. Well, I hope that they also bring the yellow back, but until then, Jennifer's not willing to try again.
There you have it, Honda. You need air conditioning and yellow paint, and you'll have a customer. I think this is interesting for a number of reasons, not least of which, as she points out, she went straight to the Goldwing as an early rider, which is kind of rare. And it's really funny, that now Jennifer is in her late 40s and is sort of like, nah, I already did the Goldwing thing. I honestly have never heard this complaint before, and I appreciate that she specified she's done all this stuff to but I don't even know what Baker air wings are, but I assume it's some sort of diversion thing that pushes air into the cockpit or around the rider or something like that, so that it blows, so that the rider gets more ventilation or something. But it sounds like she tried a lot of stuff and she didn't like it. And I guess I'm surprised. I don't know how much time you spent on a Goldwing, but I've never had a problem with the heat. I don't know.
I'm looking at Baker air wings as we speak, and it's like a little clip-on thing to divert some of the heat from the radiator
gotcha.
away from the rider. I mean, what I will say is I have spent a little bit of time on, let's see, what generation she is. 2003.
I think you rode the 5th gen one, right?
The 2003, the GL 1800 was the one that I spent probably the most time on. I read one of the first ones, but that era of GL 1800 was probably the one that I spent
the 5th gen.
The most amount of time. Yeah, 5th gen.
Yeah, right.
I didn't have an issue with it. I mean, I don't recall remembering that I had an issue with it, but I will say, not that this is a like for like, but my Honda VFR was really hot in the summertime. That was a bike that I felt was on a hot day, you were like, man, this is really uncomfortable.
Honda just doesn't make good motorcycles. I don't think they're going to make it. They're probably just going to fail one of these days. Can I say this? Last time I rode a BMW K1600, which has been years now. The K1600 had in the generation I rode these little winglets or little pieces of plastic that were part of the fairing, sort of at the base of the windshield or the sort of outermost edge of the headlight, sort of in front of where your hands are, these little pieces of the fairing, but they had hinges and you could hinge them out so that the front edge of the piece of plastic would go from deflecting air away to sort of catching air at the edge of the fairing and dumping it into the cockpit. And it would sort of shoot these two little jets of air, one on either side, toward your stomach and your torso inside the pocket of air that the fairing is. And it's pretty good idea, in my opinion, because the wind protection, weather protection on those big touring bikes is phenomenally good. But as Jennifer points out, if it's hot and it's just a nice day, you don't get any air on you, and it can be kind of stifling. Now I know Jennifer's complaining about heat on her lower body, not her upper body. So, this is not helpful, but I think that the reason I bring it up is I've always been impressed with that piece of the K16 because it's not an electronic doodad. It's not a whiz bang. It's not an automatic thing that adjusts every tenth of a second. It doesn't involve another servo motor, another thing. It's not a TFT dash. It's not electronic suspension. It's just a little piece of plastic that hinges out and dumps air back into the cockpit. It's so smart. And I feel like more touring bikes could stand to do stuff like that.
I wanted to throw out that there are companies, and I know that we've tested some in the past, and we've decided ultimately not to bring them on for sale, or we did bring them on for sale, and they just ended up not working. But companies have tried wearable air conditioning in the past, making like wearable air conditioning systems. So for what it's worth, so far in all the ones that we've tested and tried, they've been very gimmicky, and they don't really do what you're trying to do. I think for us, for the audience, Jennifer, we wanted to read your comment, one, because we thought it was interesting, but two, we wanted to throw it out there to the audience. So does anyone have any advice that you could offer Jennifer to help with her Goldwing heat woes? And if anybody out there has those recommendations, send us in, and we can pass them along to Jennifer to help defer the heat for her. And then also, are there other Goldwing riders out there that have sworn off the Goldwing until it gets air conditioning, or is there something else that you want to see for the next iteration of the wing, if you will?
Good question. All right, Spurjo. I'm going to move on to comment number 15, which comes in from Naomi. We've been holding this comment for a long time. We actually did some real life research. We did some, wait till you see. Wait till you see, everybody.
And to Zach's credit, Zach did some real life research. I did not do the research for this one. You did CC me on the emails. Got a little longer. You see your mustache is twirling itself now.
My goodness.
Yeah. Well, why don't I read the comment, and then that way you can tell us what you learned about Naomi's question. Sure. Naomi wrote in and said, as I learn about different motorcycles in the market, I'm confused about what the letters in the names of a bike means. For example, you'll often see an R, GS, GSX, MT, RC, etc. attached to the CC number of a motorcycle. What the heck did these mean? It seems like all companies are using this weird language, but I can't crack the code. Thank you for any clarification that you can provide. Zach, what did you learn for Naomi?
Well, this is a fun question. And some of you might be thinking like, well, duh, Naomi, like a GSXR 750 is a GSXR is the sport bike, and 750 means it's the 750 cc's. So what's your question, Naomi? But I think, the way we took this question was, what the heck does GSX mean?
-R mean.
Right. Or so like R is racing, maybe fine. What does GSX mean? Is there any rhyme or reason to that? And I maybe shouldn't have started there, because I don't think Suzuki gave us a very satisfying answer.
I was about to ask you what that actually means now, but Suzuki is one of the companies that I don't think we got a response from at this time.
Exactly. And the responses we got varied widely. BMW, for example, sent us an email that I just want you to appreciate. I'm going to actually do the word count here to see our BMW rep sent us an email that was 1,300 words long.
The longest email out of all the manufacturers that we got. Yeah. They take it seriously.
Everyone combined. It was a very comprehensive. So I guess I can start with BMW, and BMW I think is a good one, because BMW does follow a very kind of first of all, BMW follows a pretty obvious sort of, I don't know, linear kind of sensical code in everything that they do, right? Like if you an S1000 is the same engine, whether it's in an S1000 RR, an S1000 single R, or an S1000 XR. That's like S1000 is the engine. K16 is a specific engine. K-bikes have all been inline. K-bikes started out as inline triples, I think, and then there were inline fours, and initially they were longitudinal, and now they're transverse, but the K has always signified a certain lineage of motorcycle. And same thing with R. The most famous BMWs are R1250 GS, R1150R, R1100S. The R at the beginning means that it's a boxer. That's what it means. It goes, I mean,
Can you give us-
R75/5.
Can you give us, I don't want to go into all these, but for R, can you just give us a little bit of the history there? Because I thought it was pretty cool.
What do you mean?
So the R stands for rad, which in German means wheel. Like I thought that one was just like a little bit of a. Yeah, some of them. I mean, yeah, he was very specific about this. To Spurgeon's point, the email reads R stands for rad, which in German means wheel, but also short for motorrad, which means motorcycle. Which and he points out that Fahrrad, as he told us, means bicycle. I'm sure we're pronouncing these things incorrectly, but the point is that the derivation of the R actually goes back to just meaning a motorcycle or a wheel. And that goes all the way back to the R32, which I think the R32 is like sort of the first motorcycle that's in 1923.
Right. The one often BMW cites as like the first motorcycle. And that, those R bikes, R has always been a boxer, and they're always boxer. And so F bikes are parallel twins. The G models are singles. And BMW has lots of other things. And the thing that I like about BMW is that some of the names of motorcycles, like RS. So like if you had an R1100 RS, RS stands for Reissport. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. Also, that basically means touring sport, right? In German. So the R, but even by looking at the name, R means it's a boxer. 1100 is the size of the engine, and RS is a very clear signifier of what the motorcycle is designed to do. So there's meaning behind it, which is kind of fun. And it's not universal. I think there are F bikes that are single cylinders, not a G bike and whatever. So like there are some holes in that, but
for the most part, BMW was like the flagship of like, there's actually meaning and thought put behind each of these in a really kind of cool way.
And to be fair, Aprilia's response was sort of similar. Aprilia's answer was that the RS model, so like RS660, RS457 in sort of like those are the most recent models, but Aprilia has used RS many, many times in its history. Aprilia tells us that stands for Rennsport. So it was a very clear derivation from a word. And obviously Aprilia also uses V's a lot, and a V always signifies a V-typed engine, whether it was an RSV Miele, which Miele is 1,000, and RS was Rennsport V. So it was a V-twin engine that was a sport bike, and it was 1,000 cc's because that's what Miele means. So this is like building in the same type of way out into an engine, or it's sort of a configuration of a motorcycle that is signified within the name, which is why RS660 is not RSV660, because the RS660 is a parallel twin, whereas an RSV4 is an RS with a V4 engine. I don't know. There's like little tickles of meaning all over the place.
And then there's other manufacturers where there's not necessarily the same level of meaning.
Kawasaki basically sent us an email that said, yeah, we don't know. And Honda kind of said the same thing. It was basically like, you can look for meaning in it if you want to. And I'm sure there are people listening to the podcast that'll be like, well, no, a Honda, like, I know that Honda, a Honda VTR. Well, that's because it's a V twin, and it was an R because it was supposed to be a competition bike. So it was VTR. I know that because my Uncle Bill told me that. But as far as American Honda is concerned, your Uncle Bill made that up or learned it from someone else, because it has been a colloquial kind of like legend that's been passed down. But Honda actually didn't have any real foundational.
Yeah, there was the one comment that you found with Global Honda where they said there's various theories about the origins of something like the CB name. So like even like that's basically I'm saying like we're not really sure where this came from, but the theory is the C stands for the C in motorcycle, and the B stands for the B in clubman racer. So we went with CB for that. Yeah.
Which is like what? And that's on the Honda Global website. I mean, that's Honda saying like, yeah, we're not really sure. So I think your own your own guesses or your own sort of like stories about how you need to remember that are as good as any. Yamaha was similar for what it's worth.
Yamaha was like somewhere in the middle where like they kind of said that they like the Y stands for Yamaha and the Z has multiple meanings.
Yeah. But, like they gave like a YZF R1 or a YZF R7, right? Those are sport bikes. Our YZF R1 is a 1,000cc sport bike. YZF R3 is a 300cc sport bike. So there's some, the 3 and the 1, they mean something. But yeah, they said Y stands for Yamaha, and they said Z has multiple meanings. One could be liquid cooled, but also could mean ultimate. And the F has multiple meanings, could be 4-cylinder or 4-stroke. But of course, that doesn't apply to the YZF R3 because it's not a 4-cylinder. So it would be 4-stroke. And then the R is what you'd expect, like race or road, or like, something to do with racy road bike, high performance, blah, 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 whatever. But it's just funny that if you think about the name of a YZF R7, Yamaha is basically like, that a YZF R7 means that it is a Yamaha that is either liquid cooled or ultimate and a 4-stroke and maybe racy or for the road or high performance in some way, which is like pretty loose. I think we can agree, especially as an official statement. Have we talked about this enough at this point?
I would say that hopefully, Naomi, this has helped to answer your question. It's a good
question, to be clear.
Some of these have meanings and some of them don't. And while we probably didn't answer all of your questions, hopefully now that helps to let you know that certain manufacturers have some meaning behind it, while others are just trying to put a name together that hasn't already been copyrighted by somebody else.
Yes, indeed. And that's something that you see a lot these days. And that's like why brands tend to cling to those sort of things. I was the most curious about Kawasaki, honestly. I was like sad we didn't get a more solid answer from Kawasaki, because they were basically sort of like, it's just hard to name stuff because everything is patented. And, you're just sort of like, it seems like the upshot that I got was sort of like, we're clinging to what we've done. But I was like, why is a Kawasaki a ZX, like a Yamaha YZF? Sure, I see, like, they have a Y in there because they're Yamaha. And it kind of makes sense in some ways. But like, why is a Kawasaki ZX6? Like, where'd the Z come from? There's no Z in Kawasaki. And they just like thought it was cool. ZX is like rolls off the tongue. Maybe it's cool in Japanese and it turned out to be cool in English too. I don't know.
If anyone out there listening, maybe at Kawasaki or any of the other OEMs that maybe our email didn't bubble up to you because you're so high up in the ranks, you didn't get to see the pedestrian email that Zachary sent over. Let us know if there's anyone out there that has additional insight here that wants to help shed some light for Naomi. Please let us know. But until then, Zach, I think we have one final comment for the audience.
That we do, Spurge. This comes in from Igor via email. Igor says, I was getting interested in motorbikes and I told my wife. First mistake, Igor. She said no and has listed multiple reasons. The closest I can get to a motorbike is an e-bike, which is an electric bicycle, I guess. But instead of buying one, I decided to convert my current push bike or pedal bike. After 3 design iterations and many replaced components, I had taken the battery and motor out of a weed whacker that was no longer in use, 3D printed a gearbox, acquired an extra bicycle chain, put it all together in the bike's frame, and now I have a very unique e-bike. I call it the Theseus Mark III. As Zach in his Daily Rider episode on the Super 73 e-bike said, quote, it has a motor and it's a cycle, but does that make it a motorcycle? Boy, do I ask profound questions on Daily Rider. If my wife asks, the answer is no, it's not a motorcycle. But occasionally I think I feel a little bit of that freedom you motorcyclists talk about while riding this thing. What do you guys think? Igor sent us some pictures, some video of the
amazing pictures. By the way,
really good. Yeah. And I mean, 3D printed a gearbox, which is just part of a sentence, but there's a lot that goes into 3D printing a gearbox. I imagine. I don't know. I can't do that. Anyway, basically built his own e-bike by putting an electric motor into the sort of center section of the bicycle frame and then running that down to the crank where he pedals the pedals, and it assists him in going down the road. Pretty ingenious, I think. I think that you do not have yourself a motorcycle, but you do have yourself a pretty keen looking electric bicycle. And, the DIY aspect of it means that you can take it wherever you want from here, I guess.
Igor, what do we think? I think this is awesome. Full stop,
awesome.
just
Uncut
so
awesome.
so rad.
Yeah.
I know Zach and I were pontificating over, maybe there's something here for a larger Highside Lowside episode about when does a bicycle end and a motorcycle begin. But as far as like the freedom that we talk about as motorcyclists, one of the things that I've been really impressed, and I know that I've probably spoken about it a few times this season, was, in the midst of this season, I got a bicycle for the first time in years. I've never, since the time I've been
know how to ride a bike until
since the last time I had a bicycle, I was a child, right? In my adult life, I've borrowed some bicycles, but I've never went out and properly bought my own bicycle as an adult. And so getting into mountain biking, I've actually been really impressed with the freedom that I feel. Like I go out on a mountain bike and I'm on a mountain bike trail. I'm like, this feels like I feel as free and as out in the open as I would as if I'm back here on a dirt bike. Like I'm having a hoot and I'm feeling like I'm having an adventure. So I would imagine, Igor, I say all that to say that you're probably feeling a very similar freedom.
I think so.
That Zach and I feel when we go out and we hop on our street bikes and go for a ride. I'm stoked for you, man.
And you found a loophole in your emotional contract with your wife. So congratulations there as well.
Zach and I always want to highlight any loopholes that any of you in the audience are finding with your spouses, because we're going to learn from this too. Zach and I are always looking for strategic loopholes for how we deal with the loved ones in our life.
100%. Well, thank you very much, Igor, for the media that you sent in, which hopefully you all watching had a chance to enjoy what Igor sent in, and for your warm fuzzies about the freedom of being on two wheels. I think and frankly, Spurge, the fact that it could be another episode in the future, that's a great place to end, don't you think?
It's a great place to end our comments, but it's a great place to begin the engine sound guessing game. So, this is everyone's favorite game, a game that baffles the ears. And it's a game that's brought to you by our friends at Akrapovic. Akrapovic makes premium exhausts, some of the best that money can buy for your motorcycle, from sport bikes to off-road bikes. They've got you covered. If you need a new exhaust for your motorcycle, check out the full line of Akrapovic products. Recently, Patrick Garvin actually did a little overview on the slip-ons and the full systems to help you if you're having trouble deciding which Akrapovic is right for you. Zach, any words of wisdom for our audience playing at home as they crank up their stereo speakers? Any tips or tricks you have for how they can perhaps guess the engine sound as quickly as you did in the last episode when you shouted out Benelli TNT 300 at your stereo speakers faster than I could even... I mean, you were amazing.
Well, I had a hint in the last episode because we were talking about Chinese motorcycles. And so when I heard it, I was kind of like, what Chinese motorcycle does that sound like? And then I went straight for, because producer Chase. Chase is always. Do you think
he did anything wily this time around?
Well, this is a tricky thing because I don't know what there were some bikes referenced. Certainly, people wrote in about Goldwing. Someone wrote in about a vintage bike. I don't know, whatever. So there are some references here, but I just don't see a strong tie to any of our particular comments or to the theme of the episode. So I don't know. I'm loose on the ground here.
Well, everybody listening at home, prepare yourselves. Just quiet down the children in the back of the minivan if you're listening with the family, because you want to win this game before Zach shouts it out. So, without any further ado, let's hit play.
Well, all right.
That's a Honda Metropolitan scooter if I ever heard one.
That is a Yamaha FZR 400. Okay, Spurgeon, how many cylinders do you hear?
I hear 2.
I also hear 2. In what country was that motorcycle manufactured?
America.
Yeah. does seem that way.
That was an American V twin if I ever heard one.
And you got an eagle on your shirt today, buddy.
So I know we talked a lot about Highside, Lowside shirts, but I'm actually really proud of the thrift store find. I'm going to move my microphone for a second. I'm glad you called it out. We are recording this just before the 4th of July holiday here in America.
It is.
And
July
it's
3rd,
it's a little knock joke. So Zach, why don't you? What's the little joke?
So I'll cue you up here, buddy. There's a big eagle spreading its wings, and it says, "Why are there no knock jokes about freedom?"
Because freedom rings. Oh.
Well, that's a very appropriate shirt for this engine, I think, which goes ka-chug, ka-chug, ka-chug. And I don't know, like, maybe this is where I'm going to feel like a real spode when it's like, oh, this is actually a Honda VTX 1800.
It's a Fury. It's a Honda Fury.
It's a Honda Fury. Yeah, exactly. It's going to be some Japanese, V-twin. And that would be just like Chase, because comment number 2, do you remember, from George way back when? That was a couple hours ago now. But George was talking about, he's talking about failed European cruisers, but he was talking about, what did he say? Imported cruisers know that they won't ever get Harley riders or something like that. So it could be an imported cruiser, but I don't know. It sounds pretty.
Can I ask a question? Did you, with like the fuel pump sound, did you hear it kind of like carrying through the whole time?
Oh, interesting.
We'll play it again. We'll play it again after we get some guesses. Yeah, do you want to play it again right now? Or do you want to do a guess? No,
let's get a hint. The first hint's going to be it's 2 cylinders and it's air cooled, and we're going to be like, yeah, we knew that.
All right, let's see here. I got to pull up my hint document. Sorry, I have way too many tabs. No, I have it. I have just way too many tabs. You don't do the hints. I do the hints. All right, do the hint. First hint is a 45-degree air-cooled V twin.
I should have said 45 degree. That's of course what we meant by it being American. But if
tell the people what that means.
45 degree air-cooled V twin means it's a Harley-Davidson.
Okay.
Almost without fail. There's probably some maybe out there.
Because I don't think Indians aren't 45 degrees, are they?
No, they wouldn't dare. I think some Indians are 52s, and some of them are bigger than that. I think 52 is the number.
We know we're barking up the Harley-Davidson tree at this point. So if you're listening at home, we're on the right.
Patrick Garvin for this one.
I know.
Patrick Garvin would be like, "Oh, that sounds like a shovel head. That sounds like."
I bet you that Wiley SOB is the one that gave Chase this engine sound. That's what I'm guessing.
Okay, here's what we're gonna do, Spurge, because the next hint is not gonna help us. We already know it's a Harley Davidson. Let's read hint number 2 and then listen again.
All right. Hint number 2 is the first production bike. This is the first production bike to feature a quote unquote huge brake rotor attached to the rim rather than the hub.
Okay.
This is not a Harley Davidson.
It's not a Harley Davidson. Let's listen to it one more time. The engine's not really going to help us at this point. Let's listen one more time, because I want to soak it in. I want to soak it in.
Okay, so before you say anything, for our audience that might be newer to motorcycling, or they just don't follow some of the more obscure bikes that have happened in the past, when I read the hint, the first production bike to feature a huge brake rotor attached to the rim rather than the hub, why did we know that wasn't a Harley Davidson?
Because this is a great hint. Because very few manufacturers have played around with like the peripherally mounted front brake disc on the front wheel. One of them, most prominently, I would say, is Buell. And Buell is a motorcycle company started by Eric Buell. The story goes way back. It's pretty interesting. We're not going to get into that whole podcast right now. But Buell, I would say its most famous and prosperous era, used Harley-Davidson engines. This was Harley-Davidson powered motorcycles, often sort of like sportier and a little bit more design forward, like gas held in the frame, oil held in the frame, kind of like interesting design stuff. And one of the interesting design thing they did was this front brake, which was this sort of like, outer, mounted to the outer edge of the rim. Hopefully we're showing a picture of it on screen right now so you can get a look if you are not familiar. So that's the big hint. It's a Buell, right?
It's a Buell. It's a Buell. And I think, for those of you listening, the really interesting part of this was that Buell made essentially sport bikes, sport naked bikes, and one really wacky adventure bike known as the Ulysses. But I just don't know. We know that it's a Buell. I don't know what it is from there. Like, is it like
you can't tell what the fairing is from listening to the.
Yeah. Like I know that like in the later ones, there was like the 1125 and the 1125 CR. But I'm guessing.
Yes. But no, those were liquid cooled. The 1125s were liquid cooled, I think, weren't they?
Were they? Okay. I've ridden them, and they were their own podcast entirely. Okay.
I'm tempted to Google it, but we're not supposed to do that during.
We're not supposed to do that. You can't cheat. But my buddy growing up, my buddy had a Thunderbolt, and
that was going to be my guess.
A Thunderbolt.
That was my guess. That I think it was an XB2 Thunderbolt, right? I think that was the full name, maybe.
Can I ask a question? And I don't remember. And like, I wish I could phone a friend because I would call my buddy Nick Curry, who had a variety of wacky motorcycles when we were starting out riding together. I wonder if that bike had fuel injection or if that bike was still carbureted, because it would have been early 2000s.
Well,
I don't know. Either way.
I'm not sure, but see the Buells in that era, the Lightning, the Thunderbolt, the Ulysses, they kind of had these big lumbering air-cooled V-twins. And I think the later ones, the 1100, the 1125, and what was the most recent one called? The one right before they sort of went out of business for the most recent.
I thought the I don't know. The 1125 was the ones that were like the last of the original ones, I thought.
It was called like the 1100 RX. Or 1125, 1150 RX, 1190 RX.
That was after it split from Harley-Davidson.
Right, exactly. So my point is, those engines did not sound like this, and that makes me think that it's one of those older bikes from 90s, early 2000s, something like that. So I'm going with XB2 Thunderbolt. Spurge?
I have no reason to vary away from like Thunder in honor of my buddy Nick Perry or Nick Perry, not Nick Perry, Nick Curry. I'd go with a Thunderbolt. So let's see what we got here. So the answer is a 2003. Oh, we were so close. It's a 2003 Buell Lightning XB9S. Buell Lightning, which is just, the sister to the Thunderbolt. If you have Thunder, you're going to have Lightning, people, or the other way around. I don't remember. If you have Lightning, you're going to have Thunder, or one way or the other. But either way, Leighton. Thank you for Leighton. Either way, thank you. This is a great. So, dear producer Chase.
Yes.
This was a great engine sound guessing game pick because there's absolutely no correlation to anything we talked about today. It is an obscure enough motorcycle that created some great dialogue, but not so obscure that Zach and I were trying to guess some South African one-off motorcycle that we had never heard of before. So this is a good engine sound guessing game.
I think I'm just looking it up now. I think it's the Firebolt. Was it a Firebolt? I thought it was a Thunderbolt.
I thought it was a Thunderbolt.
Well,
maybe if you have Lightning, you don't need Thunder after all. But I thought there was a
Thunderbolt. Excuse me. That was the S3 Thunderbolt. I'm learning now on the internet, and the XB series was a different. So there was no XB Thunderbolt. That was wrong. I had that wrong. Anyway, there was a Thunderbolt and there was an XB, but they were not the same thing.
And just because now we're not cheating, the 1125R was actually a Rotex engine.
Yes.
Even though
nice.
I remember that bike actually still being sold in the Harley-Davidson dealerships. I think that to me in my mind, I remember that being like the last. So. I don't know. I wouldn't call me an expert at anything. But that was the departure, and Buell was using a BRP Rotex engine for that one, and it was liquid cooled. To your point, Zach, it was liquid cooled.
Right. Yeah, that was a different era. Yeah. Okay. Well, hey, I'm proud of us, even though maybe we cheated a little bit because we listened to that second hint.
But we didn't cheat. I mean, I don't think that's not cheating. I would rule us as non-cheaters. We didn't get the bike right, but we got the brand correct, which is
we did. We knew enough about motorcycling. Gosh darn it, to be closer than we might have been. Anyway, okay, that was fun.
We got a T-shirt to give away, Zachary. We got a T-shirt to give away. We're not going to do a traditional comment because we did an entire episode of comments, but we have new T-shirts on the website, so you'll get to pick your design, dear winner. The winner today is CB125's Cleanup Crew.
Yes.
They left us an Apple Podcast review. Thank you for leaving us an Apple Podcast review. Please, if you're listening and you haven't already done so, leave us an Apple Podcast review. Zach, this was a great comment. Why do we like it?
Well, if you're listening and you are a helicopter pilot, please do listen closer. Because this is a solicitation for a T-shirt, not from the person who will get it, but rather from his children. Bear with me. The review reads, "We are the 4 kids of a helicopter pilot who's absolutely obsessed with motorcycles. Every time he talks about them, including what he hears on this podcast, he gets stars in his eyes. He listens to you guys during his commute to his other love, flying the helicopter for the Air Medical Transport Company, and got the entire way through your backlog of episodes. He has a Suzuki V-Strom 1000 he rides to work, and we just got an old CB125S that we're fixing up all together, but mostly it's our dad's pet project. The goal for the CB125S is to teach us to ride! ! It's his contribution to passing the love of motorcycles to the next generation. He's the biggest nerd ever, so thank you for giving our old man something to listen to on the way to work, even though it's a little annoying when he references a complicated joke that he can't quite explain from your podcast. On behalf of an old-ish fan, his children." This is just, I think I got goosebumps reading it. It's just terrific.
I have like tears in my eyes just reading this. Like, this is so good. So good.
So here's where it gets tricky, because you kids, you don't listen to the podcast. You're too smart for that, but your old man does. So if you have 4 children, you are a helicopter pilot for a medical transport agency, and you love our podcasts, please do send us an email to highside@RevZilla.com, because you are probably the person.
Your kids didn't give us your name, probably out of fear for your privacy, which we get. But what we would like to do is that if you are the kids listening, or if you are the helicopter pilot thinking, I do have 4 kids and I am restoring a CB125, we would like to send you a T-shirt as well as your 4 kids. Everybody gets a T-shirt to wear while you're out there in the garage working on the CB125. And please, if you don't mind, share a family photo, you with the kids and the CB125, and maybe we can add it to the podcast. So thank you so much to the family affair that is CB125's Cleanup Crew.
Dynamite. Just dynamite. Okay.
Oh, wait, we didn't say where to send it. So if you're listening, you have to shoot us an email to Highside, Lowside @RevZilla.com with all that information. Oh, did we? Okay.
Wait a second. And also, if you don't know what the email address is, and you don't know that we need your T-shirt size before we can send it, and a mailing address, then I don't know how you got your helicopter license, frankly. All right. This has been a hoot, Spurge. I always like the comment episode. I do. I don't know if you, the listener, viewers, like it, but we think it's a blast, because you always come up with ideas that we wouldn't have covered. And occasionally you make us feel smart by asking the questions that you do. And occasionally you make us feel kind of stupid. And I think that it all balances out, and I appreciate it so much.
Well, if you have comments, you can head over to YouTube. You can shoot us an email to Highside, Lowside@RevZilla.com. And as you saw with this episode, you can leave a comment on Spotify. We've been really excited to see the caliber of questions that we're getting through Spotify. There's some really intelligent questions and comments. We're trying to monitor those to the best of our ability, and pull from those as well for this episode. Zach, if you had to pick one thing that you learned from our audience today, or in the research that you were doing for our audience today, what's one of your takeaways here?
What's my big takeaway here? I'm gonna be honest. I was excited about Naomi's question about the motorcycle names. What the heck does MT mean in Yamaha? That, by the way, is master of torque, I believe. I know. Seems a little silly, maybe. But anyway, I did happen to know that one. But her question was a good one. And I thought going to these brands, we were going to get all sorts of like tidbits, little knowledge and like history. And in 1962, actually, Soichiro Honda decided that, but no, it's all actually kind of random. and I don't mean that as like a downer at the end of the episode here. I just think it's kind of funny that so much of these monikers, these legends that we hold in our mind, it was just sort of like an idea that someone had, and they were like, "We'll just go with that," and it just stuck. And
it's interesting that you picked Naomi's comment as your takeaway, because it was actually a takeaway for me as well, but for a different reason. So, for those of you that might be familiar with some of the shenanigans that go on CTXP, Zach, Aries' nickname for you oftentimes is just to refer to you as Z. It's actually your logo on your custom tracksuit is just a little Z with the little money sign. And I find myself at some points in time now, because of Aries' influence over me, being like, "Hey, Z, how's it going?" And I didn't realize that if we're using the Morse code tracker here of what Yamaha breaks it down, Z stands for ultimate. And did you know the whole time that you were referring to yourself as the ultimate what? Well, in this case, you're the ultimate podcasting co-host, because we're almost done with another season and you're doing a hell of a job. Z.
Wow. Yeah, I should sign all of my emails to Yamaha just with Z, and they'll be like, "This guy is ultimate and perhaps liquid cool." Well, that's a very flattering thing to bring up, Spurge. I do appreciate that. And actually, with this podcast does not need to go on any longer than it already has. But I'm reminded of a story I heard years ago about an acquaintance who was in the room when they were coming up with the name for the Honda CBR 900RR when it came out early 90s, 92, maybe something like that. And they were going to call it the Fireblade, which it is still called. And
in Europe, right?
Yeah, right. It's not a Fireblade in the US. But they had this idea for Fireblade, and he said people were like laughing other people out of the room. They were like, "We're never going to call it the Fireblade. It sounds like some sort of Star Wars dweeboid. Like, what? We're not Fireblade. Like, you joking? We're not going to do that. That sounds dumb." And here we are, Fireblade, legendary name.
Look at that.
And it's just if you lean in enough, it'll that kind of thing will stick.
Well, we talked about names in the podcast before. We talked about the Ducati Monster and where that name came from,
right?
And some of the anecdotes around that. So
you're welcome, Naomi, is what we meant to say.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Well, I'm gonna go down a rabbit hole of Buell products right now and try to remind myself of what all the different Buell names were, because I'm clearly a little rusty on that in my motorcycle knowledge game.
That's right. And you'll be an expert on M2 cyclones before you know it. Okay, everyone.
We got one episode left, and it's gonna be a special guest episode. We're not going to tell you who the special guest is, not because we don't know yet, but because we're just going to save that as a surprise.
In the meantime, thank you so very much for hanging out for another Highside, Lowside adventure. We hope you got a kick out of this episode. From producer Chase and Spurge and myself, thank you so much for hanging out, and we will catch you next time on Highside, Lowside.
Adios.